Thank you, madam. Madam, your speech today has not only clarified the key structural changes but also offered invaluable perspective on the practical implication for administration and compliance. The strategic insight you shared will greatly help professionals and taxpayers as we prepare for the transition. We are especially grateful for how you address the concern raised by listeners and offered guidance on areas that affect compliance, tax planning, and dispute resolution under the new Act. Friends, we request everyone to give a lot of applause to our principal CIP, Madam Smriti. Now, this is the time to learn and see our speaker, CA Piyush ji Chhajed. Friends, we are highly honored to have with us CA Piyush Chhajed, Central Council member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. Sir's vast experience, leadership at the national level, and deep understanding of the taxation make today's session especially significant for all of us as a professional. Friends, Income Tax Act 2025 marks an important development in our tax frameworks, and we are confident that this session will provide us with the valuable insights, clarify and practical perspective to help us navigate the changes effectively. क्योंकि फ्रेंड्स पीयूष जी का जो व्यक्तित्व है और जो इनकी समझ है वो कानून की हर एक धारा को जो सरल बना देते हैं, जटिल विषयों को भी सहज ढंग से समझा देते हैं, जिनके विचारों से सही दिशा मिलती है हमें हमेशा। आज हम ऐसे विद्वान से बहुत कुछ सीखने आए हैं। इन दिस वर्ड आई रिक्वेस्ट आवर CCM Piyush ji Chhajed to come on the dais and welcome with a lot of applause. ये तो ऐसे ही चलेगा ना। हाँ, चलेगा।
Once again, very good morning to you. Thank you very much, Principal CIT, Shrimati Smiti ji Sawat. I think so there's some mistake in the name also over here. Thank you for briefing us. And as I said earlier, also, we do appreciate your efforts on the Income Tax Act. Of course, before I go to my presentation, and I was doing a study that why this simplification happened. And I tried to study it between Income Tax Act 1922, 1961, and what made it to come back in 2025. And there were three important marked differences which has happened. And you may know that in Income Tax Act 1922, lot of sections were scattered. There was no concept of chapters per se. And it was felt that it was very difficult to comprehend that way. And therefore, the chapters were built in. When Income Tax Act 1922 and 61 was came, that time also it was felt that provisos and explanations are too many. And therefore, it was restricted to 200 provisos when the 1961 Act was introduced. And that was also recorded in 12th Commission of Lok Sabha, which was 12th Commission report. But ultimately, this 100 provisos and explanations resulted up to 2025. There were more than 1,200, as you mentioned very correctly. So if you see historically, the idea was always to simplify, but it got Little may not be, I would not say it complicated, because for our members, it may not be a complicated exercise. But provisos and explanations kept on coming. I can understand as a lawmaker, you have a policy which keeps on changing. You cannot have an act which will run over a period of 5 decades or 6 decades. You may have to make a policy changes, which you do it by amending particular sections, subsections. You introduce provisos, you introduce clarifications. At the same time, sometimes the objective of the legislation has not been achieved, and therefore it is trying to be clarified through provisos or explanations. So it has been seen that generally, when the act is there in the place, there would be a reduction, there would be a concise exercise which would be done. But over a period of time, it again tries to become a lengthy, because it may be misinterpreted or it may be interpreted correctly also, which is not in line with the objectives of the department. But I believe, again, as I said, it's an honest attempt. Of course, time will tell how this has been interpreted. As you rightly mentioned, you started with the word that notwithstanding is no more there. But obviously, notwithstanding has been replaced with irrespective of anything. And how judicial minds will actually look into it. Of course, if you ask me, in my personal view, as of today, when I stand, it does not make any changes really. So really, it's because probably irrespective could be understood by anybody other than law professionals also. Of course, they should be literate, I would say. But notwithstanding was more keen to, more specific to a law professionals who could understand that this will apply irrespective of notwithstanding anything, wherever what is written. So would it actually throw open certain litigations or throw open certain different interpretations? Only time will tell. So we'll look into it. But as rightly said by the ma'am also, of course, there are no policy changes. And when we did a presentation to the select committee also, we had given a lot of clause by clause analysis. Each clause, whatever sections 536, for each clause we had given a suggestions. Obviously, in a particular, maybe we would have agreed that there would be only suggestions were fourfold basically. That there are mistakes, corrections which needs to be done, number one. Number two, it's actually depicting a wrong meaning, which didn't seem to be an intention. Third, there is actually a substantive changes which has happened in the law. And because you are here, I'll just start without going into my presentation. The substantive changes which happen, it directly goes to my members is 44EB, I would think. That's a tax audit. And of course, it's reverting back to a 2017 era. As far as 44AB, 44AD is concerned, today, if anybody is filing his tax return and he falls within the eligible limit prescribed under 4480, that is 2 crores or 3 crores, whatever may be, depending upon my cash business or non-cash business. Even if he does not offer 6% or 8%, to my mind, he is not required to do an audit today. He has to do an audit only if previously he had taken a benefit of section 4480 and he opts out. So it was like a penal provision that whenever your profits were high, you took a benefit of 4480, you offered 6%, 8%. And when now your profits are low, you want to not offer, but you want to offer 1% and 2%. So fine, it's allowed to you. But two conditions: that you do your audit subject to your income in your total income, which is chargeable to tax, higher than that. And secondly, you will not be again allowed to go to 44AD for 5 years next. So if you read the current provisions of Section 58 and Section 63 of Income Tax Act 2025, now it is suggesting that irrespective, if you do not offer 6 or 8%, audit becomes compulsory. This was a position in 2017 also, in fact. Now, I'm just trying to compare two situations. Of course, we have already made a suggestions in pre-budget and also personally before CBDT chairman in this regard. If I have a turnover of 9 crores today, and if I offer 1% as my net profit, 9 lakhs, technically I'm not supposed to do an audit because my limit is 10 crores. If my, presuming that I have more than 95% business not in cash. If my turnover is 2.5 crores, 3 crores, I will be forced to actually, if I want to avoid audit, I will have to force to offer 6% or 8% depending upon nature of receipts. Otherwise, I will come under it. So obviously, it's a good business for a chartered accountant. Audits will go up. But definitely it looks as if it's going back to 2017, looks little discriminatory from a point of view of assessing, obviously. So there are certain changes. Of course, I do not know. We were discussing at the level also. These are whether unintended changes or certain policy changes have actually crept into this. Though it may not look as if there's a more impact. Before I go into again the president, there's another very important change also which has happened. It's in regard to applicability of tax rate on a short-term capital gain if the asset is a long-term capital asset. Now, this was a great dispute between the department and the assessees on the one side, that even if there is a living provisions, if it's a depreciable asset and it has been taxed under Section 50, the calculation of the computation happens under the Section 50. But if the asset, which was the depreciable asset, was held for a period of more than 2 years or 3 years, as the case may be, it becomes a long-term capital asset. And therefore, tax rate should be applied, which is under Section 112, and that is 20% and 12.5%. Obviously, tax returns, the utility used to calculate a regular tax rate of 30%. Matters went into the litigations. And judicial courts have held that no, tax rate, because the living provision is limited to the calculation aspect. But when you apply a tax rate, you apply, because when applying a tax rate, it tells capital gains from a long-term capital asset. It does not say under the head capital gain, and it should be a short-term capital gain. Similarly, also dispute arose when the, if in this case of depreciable asset, one was a tax rate, and second was section, whether I will get a benefit of Section 54, that is exemptions under 54, maybe E, maybe 54F, and so forth. And this was also litigation again allowed in the favor of the assessee. But I believe by making an amendment currently in the Income Tax Act 2025, so it does not technically takes everything from an Income Tax Act 1961. It tries to clarify that particular line and says that even the losses, there's an issue on the losses also. But it says that, of course, now it has to be for the purpose of tax rate. It's not a long-term capital gain asset. It says income taxable as a long-term capital gain. So what will happen is, if it is taxable as a short-term capital gain, it may revert to a position of a 30% tax rate. So it tries to also neutralize those judgments to that extent. So these are two or three important, of course, those are not major. But I believe, of course, the intention of the legislature was always that, which was not coming into the act properly, and therefore it has tried to be rectified. And this could be in small impacts which will happen. Of course, again, we have represented that because the idea when the Income Tax Act 2025 came in was not to make a policy changes. Because a lot of policy changes, a lot of policy suggestions were made, but that were not accepted at that moment of time, stating that we are not going into policy. But certain things scripted in like this, so we have asked the revenue that please, if you can actually revert to it. But I don't think so it will happen, because now ultimately I expect the policy changes to happen. Of course, I don't know how many policy changes will be coming because government is also in the fix. Between in this room, I can tell when I was discussing with CBDT chairman and institute, you would be reading in the newspapers. Since last 2 years, I was trying to, and it was a brainchild of the institute, I would say, that let us come out with the joint tax returns. And now it's been discussed very widely at media, and I don't know, grapevine says generally you would not know, I would also know, but the grapevine says that finance ministry is discussing positively to that. And of course, when we made personally a presentation to the tax policy legislation team along with CBDT chairman, in principle, he agreed and he said, yes, it's a very great idea because we are moving towards an era wherein disposable income of not an individual, but a disposable income of a family is being considered. And that's what an economic way of looking at it to the taxation. Because if two individuals are running and if they're getting a tax slabs benefit of 12 lakhs, but if one individual is running and and two people are dependent on that, then he is not a better off. So that's not a equity of taxation technically, because equity of taxation would be that obviously the disposable income should be based on the family size. So the era towards which we are moving. And when we presented that, it was been positively considered. But the only worry which I thought is that how many policy changes would come, because there would be always one question been asked. of course, the parliament has been leaders and they are answerable to public, that if the Income Tax Act 2025 has already come and it has not been implemented, and if before that so many changes are there, then whether Income Tax Act 2025 was done in a hurry. So that is a worry which obviously I would also have as a part of a lot of committees. But yes, nevertheless, keeping this in worry, keeping whatever the other parliamentaries or opposition may say, but I'm sure good changes should come. And because, of course, the policy changes cannot stop only because it may not suit somebody. If it is needed, it has to be needed in a year's time. And the vision of the government, it seems to be very clear on that. And therefore, we expect that a lot of good changes to come in. Of course, this is a policy change, a major policy change, which will require overhauling of lot of forms, overhauling of lot of IT systems, lot of capturing of data, etc. Another important thing which we were expecting, and obviously in this is a lot of discussion is happening on futures and options. Of course, I'm going little differently because I could see you today over here. So on F&O also, and there is always I got a lot of phone calls also that whether the profits from F&O I can include under Section 44AD. For an example, my turnover, because the way the turnover is calculated when future and options is concerned, Income Tax Act do not say how to calculate. It's only my guidance note, which is upheld by the various high courts and the Supreme Court in a particular judgment, that yes, if the turnover is not defined in the Income Tax Act and if it is asked, if it is mentioned in a guidance note which is made by a body of experts, that is Institute of Chartered Accountants, why I do repeat, because I feel very happy to be part of this institute, that it is made by a body of the experts, then definitely an assessing officer should follow that. And that's how the turnover has become as good as a regulatory, that F&O for the F&O, otherwise generally loss and profit you never add. Minus and plus कभी add नहीं किया जाता, it does not goes beyond the mathematics, but my guidance note says with all its mind that you should do it. But the question to arise that in case of an F&O, if I have a turnover, whether I can still offer 6% or 8%. So such issues are being discussed. And of course, this act does not, we had suggested that you should clarify that 44AD should not apply to F&O, because generally profits from F&O is easily, you do not technically are required to maintain books of accounts. It's available from the stock exchanges very easily. And the idea of 44AD is whichever is higher you should offer. Of course, then there would be a different view sitting over here, whichever higher is required or not. So in fact, we have also given a suggestion on such policy. We gave it at Income Tax Act 2025 stage also. But as said that we didn't want to make, I believe this would come in. And very secondly, coming very importantly on this futures and options also, I believe that the new forms which are in goes, because a committee was formed, that whether SFT, specified financial transactions today, do not include details in regard to futures and options, and therefore they are not able to track it or compare it with my tax returns, because there's no information been flown into AIS and TIS. So I believe there is already a format's been designed, and I don't know, income tax rules and forms were expected in month of January. Probably it may now come in first week of February after the budget, to also look into the changes, if any, suggested in the budget. So I thought I'll just give a background on this, but it's a wonderful exercise coming up too. In my presentation, of course, I tried to cover it up, but what I've already spoken of, what ma'am has already spoken. Please. So what already ma'am has spoken, or what I have spoken already up till now, I'll try to skip those one slides, and I'll only try to address the important issues. I'm not going into major implications. I'm not touching charitable sector. We had that presentation because very large speaker Gautam Nayak, who was also involved as a part of our institute group when we were making a presentation to select committee on day-to-day decisions on laws and laws analysis. So he would be going into the implications of those things. So I'll just try to restrict it into my broad changes which are expected. Yes, so the objectives of tax, as you know, simplified tax provisions with clearer language. So the language was required to be changed. Reduce legal disputes by removing ambiguities, probably amendment in capital gains as I said, of tax rates, bringing in more clarity that the Section 112 tax rate will be only applicable to eco owner had the long-term capital gains. So probably this is one of the steps also because there was legal disputes around that. And hence digital oversight and efficient tax reform when it comes to search and seizure, wherein there are a lot of changes and it was been widely discussed at the parliament also. A lot of powers have been taken in this. Suppose it may be necessary also from a point of view of legislator, but as a member, as a chartered accountant, as a professional advising over clients, you should know about that. Taxpayer centric approach. It's a really a very great idea. And I actually go back to the budget speech, the which Honorable Finance Minister did say that trust first, scrutiny later. If somebody declared that's the word. And I would actually compliment because, of course, when I was also sitting outside, I felt differently. But now, when I'm interacting more with the various departments, I'm also part of a committee of Niti Aayog, which looks into tax reforms, which submitted a report. I was part of that committee. It submitted a report on decriminalization, wherein as of today, 1961 and 2025, there are 37 offences practically for which you can be prosecuted. Now, if I want to move to a taxpayer-centric approach, I want to bring in ease of doing business, which is another area where government is working concurrently. Obviously, we have to come down to that. So, of course, then our effort has been made in income tax in 2025. But I expect that something before it gets implemented or for several 50%. Since the budget could be looking into this, it would be a great that whether decriminalization of certain provisions. Anyways, that is also in the overall scheme, overall mindset of the government when they came with Jan Vishwas Act, you may recollect, where the idea was to decriminalize various provisions under the various law. So obviously, I expect a lot of this, and Income Tax Act 2025 is one of them which has tried to do it. And just take an example of an TDS reform. If you pay TDS delay today, there's a prosecution cost. There's a prosecution cost. So in this Income Tax Act 2025, they have accepted that though immediately if there's a delay, but if delay is beyond the due date of filing the return, there will be a prosecution. So they have gone up to due date. Of course, our suggestion was they will don't go up to due date. Any CEO want to declare, even if I file a tax return, otherwise the department was not aware. I myself, when I realized that there is a delay in tax, I forgot to pay tax. I paid it, I paid tax because I paid HP, I paid penalty, I paid interest. But the thing is, what we can show, no prosecution should be paid. So we have moved one step, obviously, but I believe India requires that we cannot take the largest steps. We have to move step by step, possibly, so that the compliance is prevailed. But of course, such approaches are there in Income Tax Act 2025. We may have to move forward from there. I'm just skipping that. This is structural simplifications. Ma'am briefly told, but I'm just skipping. A very important, I've already touched it. Notwithstanding anything contained in, notwithstanding anything to contrary contained in. These are the words which are used in various instances of Income Tax Act, which have now been replaced by irrespective of anything contained in or irrespective of anything to the contrary contained in. So it's basically jail of the notwithstanding and irrespective. The only body, as I said, is it has been judicially interpreted what notwithstanding stands for. Rather than how judicially looks at it, whether irrespective and notwithstanding actually, if I actually look at the dictionary meaning, technically there is no change. It remains the same. Let's see over a period of time. The words without prejudice we also use that system to place in the Income Tax Act. Now it has been reduced to 27, but again, this without prejudice has also been used or replaced in certain cases by irrespective, nothing contained about, apart from, or regardless. Probably the only idea which I could understand the purpose of this is if you see the words nothing contained apart from, they are plain English, which could be understood by any person who is literate, other than the person having a legal knowledge also. Without prejudice, nobody understood actually what really does mean. Of course, you are reserving your right without privilege that I reserve the right to challenge your, and still I am making my patience. Similarly, the act also you said that is without privilege to that, this will be still applicable to. So let's see over period. We have already said 1,200 provisions and 900 explanations. During taking of income tax bill, we realized when the provisions were actually converted into an sections, it actually depicted a different meanings. I'll just give an example. If you take section 288, because members will easily, you know what section 288 is? The name of the accountant. It's a very subject of all the members. So you find accountant, and accountant is being used across the tax act and who is accountant. This is the practice chart of accountant. And the auditor of 4480 has to determine an accountant, and there are certain restrictions that who cannot, if it is an indebted beyond 1 lakh rupees, then he is not supposed to do an audit because there is a conflict of interest. And it, but that my code of ethics is still below that. So that was a more stringent provisions in code of ethics we do have. But when this was a provision, then particular charge, so any charge in practice, provided it does not inherit something like that. So now that when provision was replaced into a state, it actually resulted into meaning. The person who is indebted below 1 lakh, then he cannot do it. If he is indebted above 1 lakh, he can do it. So there are certain errors which came up in income tax bill, but technically those got rectified into an income tax act. So again, I will tell those when you are doing provision, actually tries to clarify the way it's sanctioned. But if it becomes an independent institution, then there could be a large implications because now it is a substantive provision which needs an application. Otherwise, we all know provision cannot override the main section. Similarly, explanations, because explanations have been converted into subsections or certain explanations where definition which are not to my interpretation section or to section 2 of definition. Very good use of tables. We all know various ways in this room कि टीडीएस की रेट अप्लाई करनी है तो हम लोग इनकम टैक्स एक्ट नहीं देखते हमारे पास वो टैक्स स्क्रीन का रहता है just posted on the my table what is the individual, what's the tax rate, what is the threshold. Generally, we do that. That's what we do. And obviously, Apathy was not aware of the law, he will do that. So they try to, as income tax act 2025 is trying, that we cannot refer to such reference issued by some third party. Now, in that particular section 393, concern is a table. So all these sections of the income tax act which are concerned with TDS are now converted into tables, which will be easy to complement. Obviously, when there is a table, sometimes it goes into various pages. So you have to refer to its notes also. You have to refer to the cross-referencing also, because it becomes very important at some point of time. Initially, when you read it, you may feel that it's become more difficult. Because when you are changing the manner of reading it, you may feel it's difficult. But ultimately, my personal view is that it's actually making it very easier to read it. Because I know I'm not thinking. Please, I do not read those long sentences. Those stop. If comma is this, it will be completely different meaning. And if the comma is skipping, it has a different meaning, which does not happen over here. So that's one example. Deduction from salaries. So what are deductions available from salaries? Again, are tabulated at one particular place. Section 39 for actual cost. Again, 194. Of course, beyond this also we have given certain suggestions that exemption provision is that to be in one particular table itself. So I know today, as of today, I do not know what are the exemptions available in case of capital gains, section 54 series. But if that also could be calculated, then I do not know that that's good. That has not yet come. Let's see. May I also give an example of extensive use of formulas? Yes, so these are certain examples. If you see special provision for computation of capital gains in MND, market linked debentures, A. So if you see now the formula is given, otherwise it was basically a plain English how you should calculate it, how you should calculate the short-term capital gain for this particular purpose. So they have now given actual formulas in the act also. So it's a pure mathematics. So it's an attempt to make it more simpler when you may not apply your mind technically. You just calculate what is X, what is A, what is B and C. Rest is mathematics. Again, extensive use of formulas in the Income Tax Act. It's just a definition of demerger, 219AA, and how it should be calculated, how the net worth of the undertaking should be calculated in case of demerger. If you receive the subclause C as of today, as it stands in the explanation for 219 to subclause 19AA, it actually you have to read it in cases rather than refer to in clause A or clause B. So much of the amounts of general or multi-purpose borrowing, if any of the demerged company has stated in same proportion, if you actually read it, you also do not realize how to calculate it. It's very tough. If I had to read it 3 times actually. If any of the demerged company has stated has stand in same proportion which the value of assets transferred in demerger. So it's giving a proportionate formula for calculation of borrowings of the on the asset basis. Now it's easier. K, you know amount of general or multiple borrowings of a demerged company. What are my total assets? What are total value of assets transferred? That's all. So great, and it's a very easy way of doing it. There would be no dispute also, no mistakes in the calculation also. Of course, one may now argue what is multi-purpose borrowings or what is general borrowings. Let's leave it to that, because if you want to argue, you can keep on arguing on that. Sometimes explicit accounting was defined in section 288 and it has been used across the act. Whenever a charge certificate is required from an accountant, they have used words accountant or they are trying to define an accountant as defined under section 288. Now they have used a common in a lot of places, they have tried to merge those definitions in the section 2 only. So accountant has been defined. So you need not refer to section 5153B after under wherein accountant is now originally placed. That is a material to section 288. So accountant has been defined in section 2. IFSC has been defined. Otherwise, IFSC was defined in multiple places today also. Now it has been defined in 2 that accessible. So a lot of seriousness. There are 3 or 4 sections where 18D, 18DB, 18DB, never it for it. So nobody reflects on the serious reason is 60 or 65. It may be the same in all these 4 sections, but it is given as a separate definition and all these 4 lists. ATD, DUB. So you will always be in a confusion state that senior citizen की age अलग तो नहीं है चारों section. Now it's defined, it's a common 60 years or more. It will apply across the act wherever senior citizen is being used. The important, of course, previous year has been replaced by tax year. I'm sure the members will be happy with that. It's easier. Yes. I was just wondering, I was talking because numbers, how would you remember sections that in your course remember? When numbers asked me that it's because it's difficult now to remember what 43 years is, what 24 is. And I was just wondering the students, they will face the biggest. They are now studying Income Tax Act and May 2027 examinations, they will be giving another Income Tax Act review. And they are expected to at least know these sections. At least I have you and I both, the department and we have a liberty to refer an act at any point of time. Which they do not have. So definitely I think so. If anybody feels that why this was a need and you will be something I need to remember sections, please keep in mind those students. I think so they are most to suffer of that. And everybody is suffering maybe that to certain extent, like he said, because within the 6 months period, 9 months period, you will be actually applying 2 acts. Because your tax returns, your audits up to September or October or November will happen under the Income Tax Act 1960. And at the same time, concurrently, from 1st February 2026, if you want to calculate advance tax, you have to refer to Tax Act 2020 on 15th of June or 15th of September. If somebody is seeking an advice for current financial year, what will be his tax looking for this current financial year, you may have to keep in mind Income Tax Act 2020. As I said, as of today, there may not be much differences principally, but definitely you will have to think this way. Tax year, of course, the objective stated is to avoid confusions. And it do happens. When he qualified newly, he also used to build financial 24, 25 he file. You do not know whether it's an assessment year you are talking to or you are talking to financial year. What you are referring to. And it happens today also. You just take a case of charitable trust. When you want to actually calculate your accumulation for 5 years, where does actually 5 years end? In the next year, it's going to be taxed. You actually calculate here. कौन सा financial year? March 24, 5 साल end करो. You actually have to do it. First, you have to see the assessment and then calculate because a date can only be known. Last date can only be known by the financial year and not by assessment year. That's the point of time. So I think it's a good attempt. Again, there are certain presentations and schedules also. As good as evaluations I can see, when the income under section 10, that is which incomes which do not form part of total income, or very loosely as you say, it's an exempt income or non-taxable income. They have been actually clubbed into different schedules based on the nature. So, for example, whatever exempt income of non-resident is concerned is clubbed into schedule 4. So they may not be scheduled 10-4, 10-6, 10-15. So if I want to today, if I want to understand and if I want to advise my non-resident, then what are exemptions available to you? Technically, I have to read from 10 subclause 1 to 10 subclause 38. Today, I know I just referred to a schedule 4. Whether it was appearing earlier in 10-4, 10-15, 10-6, 6-8, everything will appear in a schedule. So it becomes easier for them also directly to refer a schedule of exemption which is applicable to them. And similarly for agricultural income or some schemes which is more applicable to individuals, more applicable to HCFs. Examples of business trust, investment fund, they have also been clubbed and so on and so forth. Similar examples, I'll just try to skip this also. Retirement benefits, exclusion from total income under section 10, disturbance deduction under 19(1). Now again, all this have been clubbed into. This is an example of a schedule. If you see, all has been clubbed in 19(1) in a particular table. Salaries provide for deduction from following. Gratuity, there's a serial number 3 to 6. Committed pension, serial number 7 to 9. Retrenchment compensation. So you did not go into the various sections. They not go to read those English, understand it. They have been put into this curriculum scales. (44) AD, which is now section 54(8). Audit is covered in section 68, 63, sorry. And I already discussed to you that there is an expansion of the scope. Now, just keep it in mind for 1st April 26-27, not applicable for financial year 25-26, assessment year 26-27, which you will be doing your audits from the beginning of September. The applicability remains same. You have to do audit only if it is opting out or if it is basically opting out. If its turnover is less than 3 crores or 2 crores. Of course, ma'am, you are also trying to see that why 2 crores, 3 crores. It should be 3 crores. Unnecessary by complicated and give much more different thresholds. So I have different thresholds and I already also did 1 crore, 2 crores, 3 crores, 10 crores. So it's of course it's for an auditor, but even the assessee could not understand. Today assessee only understands CA will audit करना तो audit करना. He actually he can't read it because he does not know sometimes what it is applicable at 1 crore, sometimes at 2 crores, sometimes at 3 crores, sometimes at 10 crores. And if he actually said with the different assessors वो बोलेगा तेरा 2 करोड़ में audit हुआ है, मेरा 9 करोड़ पे audit हुआ है, CA बदल दे. CA पैसा बना रहा है. So it's actually a difficult position. Of course, it does not happen in the smallest, but obviously you take it from mind of an associate if they are discussing. So obviously we are reverting back to this particular position. A very important amendment which has gone through this is if you see 58 subclause 4 provides that any loss or allowance or deduction allowable under the provision of Act shall not be allowed in respect of the resulting. When it is stand before 44 AD contains a provision that any deduction allowable under section 30 to 38 only. Only those were restricted in the case of presumptive income. So loss or allowance technically intra-head or either head was allowed earlier to preservative income as of today. Which, according to me, it stands discontinued from Hospital 26 International. Tax year. So this is a small change, a policy change which has crimped with. Again, small body change. Disability deduction in respect of maintenance of a person with a disability who is independent. There is a flat deduction of rupees 75,000. What do you mean by flat deduction today? मिलेगा अच्छा 50,000 हुआ तो भी 75 90 हुआ तो भी 70. So this flat deduction has been replaced up to 75. So if I have to adjust it up to 75,000, one may say that up to 75 is it is actually on the actual basis. If you are intake 50, you get 50. It's sort of flat deduction per se. So this is the small change which I feel again has been made by the act. Of course, important change. I don't know why this has happened. Any profit deductions requires certain forms to be filed. Like what is profit claim? Sections 80 IA, deductions in case of housing projects, backward industries, anything, IA, IB, 10AA. Whenever we were claiming a deductions, a form is to be filled, and that form was to be certified by a chartered accountant. And that form we were filing before the due date of filing the tax returns. Of course, there are two forms, and whatever deductions they are claiming, we are also reporting as a form 3 also, based on that particular calculation. More importantly, that form also required to submit separate financial statements. So, for example, I was claiming a deduction for a renewable energy. I had a solar plant, I wanted to claim a deduction. I had an overall set of financial statements. I used to prepare a separate financial statement for it. Why I had to audit it? Because suppose I have to allocate expenses, there will be a common expenditure to a solar unit and a regular business. And based on that reduction, we used to calculate certified by the auditor that this is a unit, then financial statements of that particular unit, based on which a calculation was done for profit reductions. Of course, somehow, of course, the requirement of audit is not spelled in this code. It is spelled out in all the conditions, but it does not use it seems to have been missed in case of section 138, 139, 141, and 140, which are relevant for the purpose of which are criteria with ADIA, IAD, ADID, and level. Now, those profit and deductions technically can be claimed without filing any form, without any certification from an accountant. That is chartered accountant in our case. So, this is an amendment which seems to have been again in Income Tax Act 2025. So, if anybody is claiming any deductions, I think so, he will not require to give any certificate. Of course, we have also tried to make a solution that this should also not continue because also the deductions and areas I am trying to report in forms physically. If you want to remove separate forms, because I also believe that for an example, today if I want to opt for an old, I am to default tax value. Just take a case of an individual, I am to default tax value. And if I want to opt out, to the old scheme, I have to file the form. We do not understand why the form is required. If I am calculating a tax, if I am calculating a tax and in ITR itself I give a tick that I am opting for, why there is a requirement of separate form? If I pay to file the form, I will have 141 and then the WPI application. I would say the procedural default. Judiciary generally a procedural default having in favor of assessing. So unless still reduce the litigation, but I do not know. The forms are expected in month of February, I think so. And if those comes with such consolidation happens, and if this is one of their ideas, then obviously even if the CS certificate will go down, but it's good. Because if I am certified it in form CC itself, whenever I am giving a certification in a form CC, there could be a link to the calculation in a form CC itself. So as a members also, or as a associate also, I know that I have to file only one form. As of today, we are experiencing that even if the VAT is not applicable, 143 notices are being issued if I am not actually filing 29 capital B form. So there are a lot of controversies in this which can come out. Another important very certain subject, living provisions. The title of section 68 is changed. नीचे कोई ज्यादा change नहीं है. The title is changed. I don't know why. Anyway, I just want some interaction. Gas credit को unexplained credit क्यों कर दिया? What could be? एक पहले लिटिगेशन था कि गैस क्रेडिट मींस all your entry like a purchase for an example, then the department got it in their favor. It was against us see that even a purchase entry, a bogus purchase entry is a cash credit. Because the credit is been booked, of course we book purchases, no cash involved, still it was been looked at under section 68 and judicial rulings were in the favor. Then why this unexplained credit? What could be the implications? Of course, the thought process was that one may argue that cash credit should be only an amount of sum. It should be actually a cash receipt, then only should be equals to avoid those arguments, probably I feel unexplained credit. That's what I feel. To avoid that, though they had a judicial precedence in their favor, but the legislature and its all its wisdom would have thought, you never know. Even the Supreme Court's whoever judgment gets reversed by a fair number judgment in India. So you know, after 100 years, we have been told that adultery is not anymore a crime after so many people have been hanged. So you don't know what happens. So probably just to cover up their growth. Section 68 has, 69, 68, 68, A, B, C. Sorry, 69, A, B, C. Those have been now merged into 102 and 105. And one important change which has another, if I read 103. Section 69 deals with unexplained investment not recorded in books of accounts. Whereas 103, which is again an unexplained investment, deals with investment not recorded in books of accounts, or where AO finds that the amount of investment exceeds the amount recorded in books of accounts. So 69 and 69A were separated. If it's not recorded in books, 69. If the amount recorded was less than what is technically incurred, was 69A. They are merged. I think it was a very correct step because wrong application of section itself has sometimes resulted into a medical addition to the cost. Because instead of having 69A, all of vice versa. So to avoid such mistakes happening at the assessment level, I think so that has been a very nice move. 104, if I see again 102 and 105, I just read the bold para, the first para, very important. Corresponding provisions 102 to 105 provide that if SSC offers no explanation or the explanation offered by SSC is not found satisfactory, the value of unexplained credits, unexplained investment assets shall be deemed. Now this was may be deemed to be the income of the SSC for the financial. Now may has been replaced by what the state says. Now this duty was to treat it as an income, though it was an unexplained asset, unexplained expenditure, unexplained investment, as an income of an assessee for a particular financial. It was made. So what does may and what does shall mean?
There is no discretion on the secretary officer. They have to.
Yes, earlier also yes. They was always read as shall. If it was not for satisfaction. And this is still because the satisfaction is always there. It's not for satisfactory. So activity is satisfactory. So satisfaction have to be demonstrated by the officer. You will still challenge the satisfaction. I will do my case. By me. My shell is now it has to be taxed as the argument which we used to make that I am to my source. You please tax in the source of source. I have given all my details, all my data. So now it becomes because of me. So assessing officer was free to decide that yes, he has proved his credentials, he has proved identity, training, worthiness, and genuineness. You tax it in the eyes of the person who has actually given me the money or who has passed on that particular credit. Now the the law allows them, it states that it has to be taxed when the first credit is actually come. So that's what an idea is. DTAA. What does DTAA? It has just been clarified how the section double tax avoidance agreement would be actually interpreted. So in section 159(7AA) has added clause C that DTAA has been added to provide that if any term is used in the agreement that is not defined in the agreements, that is DTAA agreements, or in the act or in any notification, it will have the meaning assigned to it in any act of the central government. And in any other case, in any other the law of this civil law. So if there are several words used in BTO, for example, provided, including services and certificate, which may not be correctly defined in certificate used. So how do you refer? Generally, you would have referred to an dictionary. So they say, please do not go to dictionary first. First, you see all the acts. कितने सारे हैं कि हमको नहीं पता. So you will have to now rely upon AI. Whenever you find that if keys for included services, what does it mean? If it is not defined in that, you will go into whatever acts of central government it is. Fortunately, it's not state government. Otherwise, state government का जो royalty वो लोग charge करते हैं और mining, diesel, they would have a separate definition also. So it's only a central government act. You may have to refer for definition of those particular words appearing in DTAA. I think that's a clarified position because otherwise judiciary would have looked into it various interpretations, various definitions which appear in a dictionary. So they wanted to know, first we refer to various laws, then we'll see. Meaning of associated enterprises, again 92A endless. If you see, I don't know how many of you have seen that associated enterprises, whenever you do a transaction with an associated enterprises, which is a non-resident, which is located outside India, section 92A applies. And those transactions have to be done at arm's length. Whether they are at arm's length or not, it has to be certified by an accountant, auditor, form CCEB. So that is, so there's a definition of associated enterprise. Currently it says 92A subclause 1 is a general and 92A subclause 2 gives certain specifics. How directly and indirectly shareholding would be considered. For example, it lists various areas. Now what they have done is the revised section 162 lists various circumstances wherein the two enterprise shall be considered as associated enterprise. It has become more specific by removing the general provisions and delaying provisions. Good step out there. Now all the circumstances have been defined. पहले क्या होता था आप उस लिस्ट में नहीं आते थे सब क्लॉज 2 में तो ऑफिसर would have argued that सब क्लॉज 1 is general. So I would still say that you have an associated enterprise. And the associated enterprise when it's a general, it is a control base. I don't know how many of people of you are aware. We still are fighting how to determine a control, how to determine a significant influence. These words are being used in areas where we have to submit consolidated financial statements. And I am a vice chair of expert advocacy committee of institute which gives opinions on areas. And we still could fight if we had 20 experts of various cities, you will have 10 opinions that they control there. 10 opinions that control the control area. So it's so such general because it's a principle-based application when you talk of accounting standards. It becomes very difficult if you want to apply it in the laws. There will be a different opinions, different judicial precedents, which has been trying to be removed. I'm just skipping NGOs because Gautam will be taking it. There's a huge lot of changes which has happened in non-profit organizations. I think so. You should be worried about, not worried about, you should be aware of, mindful of. That's all. TDS again, I'm just picking up, I think important first. Time limit for delivering TDS and TCS correction statement. Am I right? That was what was the time limit currently available to you?
6.
Now this has been reduced to. Yes. There's an advertisement issued by department. Have anybody come across? आप देखो आपको अगर कोई करेक्शन करना है तो 31 मार्च 26 तक करना है आपको है कि नहीं for any correction statements for financial year 18 19 19 20 20 21 and 23 24 you have to do it before 31st March 2026 so as I said department is already corrected अगर आप आपकी उनकी वेबसाइट खोलोगे तो ये आएगा there will be a picture there will be an AI image coming in that you need to do that because the time limit for correction in previous papers after percentage 26 is going to be reduced to 2 weeks. Section 197. Section 197 lists certain sections wherein if applicable tax rate is for example 2%, 10%, 20%, and you feel that it will actually result in my cash flow will block because my profits will be less and I may have to pay more. You can apply today for lower rate of deduction of tax. But it was now restricted to certain sections listed in section 197. Now, after the amendment 395, you can apply for any section. So, अगर आपको section वो 1% पीरियड से आपका इमूवेबल प्रॉपर्टी बेची है 1%. और आप चाहते हो कि मेरा तो लॉस है, ठीक? I bought it for 1 crore, I sold it for 90 lakhs. Why my 1% should be okay? You can apply for a waiver under section 395 also as of this. So that's the thing. I think so it's a real available from who. They have already made the procedural changes as you all know. Even 197 certificate you have to apply online now. And they are supposed to respond it within 30 days period. This is fairly happening well, except certain cases which may not have happened. But it's happening well in an online mode wherein there is no physical interaction also. So again, it's a good move to release the cash flow. You can apply it whenever you require. Now, very important. I'll come to search and see the provisions. I think I have the next 10 15 minutes. So that's why I see previous provisions. Section 131 1A. Everybody knows. आपको समझ में इशू होता है. If the authorized officer, I am reading 131 1A. If the authorized officer referred to in section 132 search before he takes action under clause 1 to 4 of that subsection as result to suspect. So before taking a search, if officer feels that if I think any information may not come, so then he would do a search, then he would record his results. So he can take a statement, he can actually summon you under 131 1A today before the search cost. What does now amended section says? He can summon you even during the course of such action. So if the summons are issued earlier also, fine. Even during the course of search, he can summon under section 131 1A. There's no reason. One 1C, 247 1B has been replaced. 132 has been technically replaced by section 247. Now the scope has been extended not only to an undisclosed income, to include undisclosed foreign income assets under Black Money Act also. So an authorized officer may handles for the search any material which is detected during the course of the search can also be used for making an assessment under the Black Money Act. Otherwise, the search was acting under the Act section 132. So the restriction was that you would do an assessment also under the Income Tax Act. Of course, there are indicate provisions under the Income Tax Act also to tax those are disclosed search. But if there is no power available to tax it under the Black Money Act, because it's very important. Black Money Act gives you technically a limitation without any carryback. That's the most important change which may actually happen. Again, section 247, 132, 3. Currently, authorized officer may, where it is not practicable to seize any cash, seize any such books of accounts, other documents, money, bullion, jewelry, or other valuable article or thing of course, he used to issue a prohibitory order for the period of or and serve an order on the owner. Now, if you see, it was of very specific. POs can be issued only for books of accounts, other documents, money, bullion, jewelry. Now it has been replaced with an array बैंक लॉकर पहले भी PO होता था and then practically it was happening. But now it's there equally. Tomorrow if somebody may challenge it. Bank account or computer system. Actually, that way is the computer system को seize कर. They actually do it. You may somebody realize wanting to take a backup and then do it. And sometimes we have seen also computer system को क्योंकि कैसे सील करेंगे. मान लो for example तो वो systems को उठा के CPU नहीं अलमारी में डाल दे. That's what it is. And अलमारी को lock करते हैं. So of course, so it expands the scope. Now you can directly actually seize it.
But sir, he can use the other system to do it. इसको भी क्या login password और करना है. He has to use the login and password. He'll go and use someone else.
No, very easy. So only my data is residing in the local CPU now. So the question is my data is in CPU. Cloud पे आएगा अभी आगे आता है next में आएगा cloud पे. Because nowadays CPU does not have any data technically. What you do when you actually see the CPU, all my data is though is completely cloud. All your accounts are on cloud. So what you will do by giving the system until you have access available to that. So that power is also coming. So of course, these are all powers in relation to search and seizure, which I believe because search actually happens after the seizure. It's a huge responsibility of the officer who is actually operating this. There is mindful of that. So it's not in a normal post, it's only related to search and seizure or a survey postings which we'll see. You see 132 again. Containing the provisions of search and seizure provide for consequences for omission of failure to produce books of accounts or other documents for which summons was issued. These are the constitutional provisions. Now again this has expanded. So if you have been asked to submit any books of accounts or any other documents, now this has been expanded any information in electronic form or on a computer system. So if any information is sought and if you do not actually allow the authorized officer to inspect any information in electronic form, then he has a power to override such access also under subclause 3 of 247 subclause 1. I think so if you may declare a lot of discussion happened on this, then how you can actually override the access code to my computer system. And I believe there was a judgment of I don't remember the high court, whether it was said that ultimately after you say access code with the search. And I immediately and you actually break over the access. That is just the question. The statements have to be recorded voluntarily. It cannot be just take an example, the systems were asked me if you are not giving it. But when Google तभी is voluntary. When Google नहीं, then also voluntary. It's actually as good as taking under position. आपके पास में माला दवा भी ले लिया, मेरे email account से access ले लिया, मेरे Instagram का ले लिया, Facebook का ले लिया. So of course the computer system where actually you have an accounts, you have your actually books of accounts. Such an access code problem was understandable. And it was because if you do not have an access to such a records, I think the search would become a meaningless exercise. So it was a welcome. But we had suggested that of course it should be restricted. Some overriding power to an access code should be restricted not to our personal social media accounts, personal email accounts, because it's not only revenue, certain tax evasion which may be visible from there, but there are a lot of other privacy things in those social media accounts which I would not like to have an access to somebody. But of course, as of its stands, if there is a search, not in the normal circumstances, please keep it in mind. It's only during course of search, they are undertaking a power to override all the access codes of the computer system. And when I talk of access codes, it will be an operating system. It will be to a particular software, maybe an accounting software. It may be to another non-accounting software also, maybe a CRM account also. maybe your social media accounts also. So it can override all the access systems to the computer system. Computer system has been defined to include now remote server or cloud server or virtual digital space. That's what has been understood. So if my accounts are on the cloud, then also that access code can be global. Then of course, they have all then generally all the search parties would have technical experts along with them to break open such access codes. They have a panel of such IT professionals, hackers, I don't know, and who actually broke open for the department and they actually do that particular exercise. So of course, now computer system includes those cloud servers. They have taken power to override those access on all computer system and computer system includes cloud. So in a way, it has been, of course, expanded.
So what about account maintained by a chartered account, like say, when account is maintaining the account, so they got power even to access the accounts and the course.
If supposing if those are residing and those are residing at the system of a third party, I would not say chartered.
Okay, that's fine.
And the third party, whosoever is the professional. If it is residing in third party and if there is a warrant issued for that particular premises, obviously there. Then there will be source of both premises, all the physical documents, computer system, breaking open the access codes of all those particular premises.
I think that person only.
I don't know whether the next speaker is here. Sir, I just I'm not just technical institutions. So the expert and also other provisions which you would 247.6. 1 second before words. Another amendment is in 251 small, within a period of 60 days from date on which the last date of authorization of search was executed. So technically, whatever person, whatever documents were seized, you would have detailed up to 60 days. Which was considerable. Now the time is 180 days from the date on which a search is initiated under section 347 or replacing under section 48. Section 134 allows currently to examine any person on oath. Correct? Now there is little amendment in this, expanding the scope. If you read 247 of clause C, authorized officer may during the course of any search or seizure examine on oath any person who is found to be in possession of control of any books of accounts or other documents, assets, or any information in electronic form or computer system. So you may not have a books of account, but there is some computer systems or having access to such computer system, or any other person who is present in the premises or is being searched. So it will now access to any other person other than the person who is being searched. That's an expansion of the scope again. Section 133 is survey. Everybody may know there's a well-settled law that because under the survey a statement could not have been recorded under the oath and therefore that statement did not have a lot of students are there. So now it has been amended, section 253, which deals with the survey. Now the power has been given to record the statement on oath also in this regard. Again, similarly for 133A, provided necessary technical, even during the course of survey, the income tax authority can use the necessary technical and other assistance for including and maintaining taxes.
None of them are retrospective, I thought.
First, I will release it.
Retrospective things are coming in.
Of course, I will just keep the certain provisions. Because already other speakers there, we have a break. I am not taking it. Thank you very much. The only question we can just and if you have any questions, I have you can you write to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Piyush.
I'm sure Manoj will be coming in depth in a lot of other things also. Thank you.
Thank you, Piyush sir. Really, your presentation beautifully simplified what could have been a very complex subject. Now I request our past convener CA Anil Sharma to present a vote of thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, convener sir. Excuse me. Well, I request members to wait for a while to give a deserved vote of thanks to our dear Piyush Chhajed, who has covered the Income Tax Act 2025 very well and has highlighted the simplicities brought about in the Act and also given provision by provision his opinion, whereas he has also been very interactive and rather participative in the process of the bringing about the Act and making it more meaningful. Now, I have got a small suggestion where Piyush Bhai was confused that tax audit will be applicable at what level to which SSE. So please open a window of 5 years so that he can file a tax audit report after filing the return in case he has not been able to interpret it. With this few words, I thank Piyush Bhai for the great effort he has taken in putting things in the right. Even though the Act has made a lot of tables and schedules to make it more, make us grasp the details very easily rather than just going roundabout with the language of the Act. Piyush Bhai similarly made a very tabulated information which will be handy for us to use. With few words, I now thank Piyush Bhai for his great effort.
Please be seated. Please be seated. Not a single one will go. Please. प्लीज नाश्ता चालू नहीं करेंगे जब तक हाँ। प्लीज
फ्रेंड्स, आज हमारे बीच में सीए छलेज जी खिड़िया बैठे हुए हैं, जिन्होंने 10 साल की मेहनत से अंधेरी में सब रजिस्ट्रार को ट्रांसफर कराया है, सब वार्ड के ईस्ट में। हर लोगों को नहीं तो अंधेरी से रजिस्ट्री के लिए वडाला जाना पड़ता था, कोई भी अगर काम हो सोसाइटी का तो वडाला ही जाना पड़ता था। आज हम चाहते हैं कि जेबी नगर स्टडी सर्किल की तरफ से इस कार्य के लिए उनका सम्मान किया जाए और चर्चा में कृपया आगे हैं।
एलएसजी डीडी अपने पुराने मेंबर हैं और डेडिकेटेड हैं। शायद आपको मालूम होगा कि वो बीजेपी प्रोफेशनल सेल मुंबई के प्रेसिडेंट है। उनके 10 साल के अथक प्रयास से सोसाइटीज के जो सब रजिस्ट्रार हैं उनके लिए सबको वडला जाना पड़ता था अंधेरी एरिया के, तो बीच में इवन एमएलए लोग हार गए, वो लोग कुछ नहीं कर सके कि छोड़